Hello, welcome to our talk on the progymnosma to exercises, elementary exercises and eloquence from a long time ago. Dr. Clegg has asked me to just talk through a few of these exercises here today, just to give you some ideas from a few years of personal experience with them and a little bit of reading and studying I've done on them over the years. And just to give you some ideas on how to put them into practice. I'm not going to necessarily spend a whole lot of time reading the content of these slides. You can certainly do that yourself, but I just want to give a few highlights, talk about some things here, and try to make this a concise and useful little chat here as we go through here. Okay, so I see we're focusing on primarily 9th and 10th graders here with these slides and some of these exercises, and that sounds good. As we move forward in them, I'm sure you have a copy of the slideshow. If not already, I'm sure you'll get one maybe in PowerPoint format, or even print these out for yourself for references. Not just as we go through them here, but certainly as you use them in your own classroom, things like that. The basic idea of this first overview slide is that these exercises are meant to be ultimately practical. These are writing activities, after all. These are things that you do, things that the students will make. They're certainly undergirded by some years and centuries by now and millennia of the theory, but it's really all about getting the students to think and practice, read and study, sure, as preliminary preparation for what they're about to compose in their own exercises and their brief papers and things like that. But really, it's about getting the students to do things and make things. And so they are designed here, as it says there in the fourth point, from simple to more challenging. The hope is that certainly by this point, 9th, 10th grade, that most of the students who especially come up through the grammar school will already have years of putting these into practice already. I'm not sure if the grammar school does all 14. They probably don't do a whole lot of thesis and law editing and revision down in 5th, 6th grade, certainly. But a lot of these earlier ones, I'm sure many of the students will already have some practice in knowing what those are about. So there should be some familiarity. But obviously, when you're dealing with new students who come in at all grade levels, 7th, 8th, 9th, or higher, certainly, they won't necessarily have this background. And so it's important, I think, even as you do these things, sure, try to build upon that experience already for those that had them in grammar school. But as with all classes at the upper school, definitely it may be almost overly optimistic to think, well, they did it once 5 years ago, they should have this down by now, right? So we take as perspective that yes, they might have some background, but definitely maybe even treat it almost like it's a new thing. And because they're range from simple to more challenging, I know there's this general plan here in this slideshow to have the 9th graders sort of skip ahead to some. You certainly can do that, but like I said, it might be even better just to focus on the earlier ones in 9th grade, do the middle ones 10th and 11th grade, and certainly by the time 12th grade and thesis, focus on those. So yeah, we'll talk briefly about those more advanced ones that are sort of scheduled here for 9th grade. But I would certainly encourage you, maybe depending on the workload and the way the school year unfolds, definitely focus on the early ones for 9th grade, okay, because they are intended to build on one another. And so those later ones that seem like, oh, these could be easy for 9th graders to do, yeah, they probably could. And you could probably, I'm sure you could get some useful work out of the students who jump ahead to 9 and 10 of these 14. But they really are designed to be incremental. And so it's something just as a word of caution, not to be argumentative or anything, but just as a note of caution from experience that they're in this order for a good reason. Okay, so the main thing, again, if you remember, me, one of the, I try to spend a lot of time talking about the philosophy, the ideas behind why we do what we do, even though, like I said, this is supposed to be eminently practical. One thing to keep in mind, certainly 9th grade, is part of the reason that Summit exists is because we know that a very popular way of doing education in the Western world today is driven by worldviews, ideas, attitudes about children and intelligence and creativity that we disagree with. And so that's one of the reasons why this school exists. And so, the contemporary fad of just telling children, hey, you're young, you're new, here, be creative. Uh, Here's no boundaries, just do whatever you want, speak from your heart or whatever. That sounds really great in one sense. It does sound, the empowerment of the individual, and that is certainly a positive thing in some situations. But hopefully, as a classical school, we know that boundaries, limits, regulations, rules, parameters do not impede creativity. They are, the way you get genuine creativity. Painters have a certain size canvas that gives them the freedom within the framework of how big this painting is going to be to make something, right? And most students need that framework and creativity, or their framework for their creativity to really come through, right? There's certainly some students that are atypical, but most of them will benefit more by you telling them, all right, this is a 2-page paper, than just say, all right, do this task, however long your heart tells you to do it, right? And so the point of these exercises is that they are rigid. Many of them have very detailed steps, but that is really going to help them be generally creative. The masters, the Renaissance masters became great and geniuses because they studied the works that had come before them, right? Michelangelo spent years training, studying the works, Ghirlandaio and others that had come before him in painting and especially sculpture work. He didn't just wake up one day Mozart is probably maybe the only example of a 4-year-old kid that can just spontaneously create wonderful music out of not having to study anything. Leonardo, all the turtles, all the guys studied what had come before them. The great musicians of the 20th century built upon this musical heritage of what had come before, blues and jazz, and even the blues and jazz masters before them had studied what had come before, and then they had a voice. And so we want the same thing for our students, right? That here's what the great works that have come before you. Here are the great ideas. You are part of this, thousands of years of human, creative, literary, artistic, philosophical inquiry to find out what it really means to be human as created by God. This is we want to instill upon them that yes, you are new and unique, and you're created by God to do new and wonderful, fantastic things, but you are also part of a great legacy of intellect and artistry, and not just here we are in calendar year whatever, and so now be yourself. We want our students certainly to be part of this rich tradition of classical Christian education, certainly. So, encourage, definitely, I would say the point of all that is to say, don't try to downplay the rules and the regulations, the patterns of these exercises. Don't try to let the kids, oh, well, if you want to skip that part, skip that part and just do what you want to do, right? We want to follow these things, imitate what has been done, what has worked pretty well for human history for thousands of years in these exercises. And once they have that familiarity of here are the patterns, here are the ideas, then they can genuinely be creative once they've lived long enough to experience things and read and seen and done all these things that have come before them as much as possible. Then they can really be creative and think once they have these proper frameworks for how to be creative. So, don't just downplay, oh, here are the 6 parts, but just we'll just do 2 or 3 of these 6 parts. Do the whole thing to really help the students generally be creative. Okay, so like I said, here are the 14. It's good, even if you're teaching just 9th grade or just 10th grade, it certainly is helpful, I think, for you to familiarize yourself with the whole plan, the whole scope of where they're supposed to go, beginning with Miss and then adding a thesis or a law. And I know there's sometimes, just by the nature of as we said, the flow of the courses, sometimes will dictate doing things in a different way. With debate, they sort of jump into attack, defend a bill or law. Sometimes even in debate class years before they do thesis and things like that. And I'm not saying that's terrible. We should change everything to make sure that we follow these 14 in this order. But as much as you can, use these orders, understand why they're in the order that they are. And if you are in 10th grade, make sure you know what they should know in ninth grade and what they've already done, things like that, and where they should be going in 11th grade and 12th grade, and just try to make the flow whatever class this is for, English or history, or certainly these exercises are useful not just for English class. We don't want to teach the students, well, you're doing this thing in English class, because then they'll think, oh, the only time I need to think this way or write this way is for English class. When I don't have an English class, I don't have to think and write this way, right? We want these skills. These skills are so eminently practical that they should be just a part of how they think and write almost any situation, regardless if it's for a class or, certainly emphasize that these are skills that they will be using in real life, hopefully, for many years to come. So, I would encourage you, be familiar with the general flow of everything, and look at these 14, and we will, progress from there. All right. So let me just pause this video here, and then we'll start off, since these are 15-minute increments, we'll dive into the first exercise here with the next video. All right. See you soon.